Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the session When East Meet West. Seems to be very romantic, but it is a contextual discussion about the literature and the literary transfer. Though it sounds very kitschy in a post-colonial country, let me begin with the Ballad of East-West of Rudyard Kipling. East is east, west is west, and never the twain shall meet, till the earth and sky presently at God's great judgment seat. But there is neither east nor west, nor border, nor breed, nor birth. So what does he mean here? Today, Dr. Helmuth Niederle,
good afternoon,
who is basically has his roots in West, but being an anthropologist and a conscious writer, he is well aware about the culture of East of India. He has translated Naga poetry in German, a lot of, I don't know exactly, prose maybe from Philippines.
Yeah, it was prose from the Philippines, it was prose from Africa and from India. Yeah.
And me, a writer who has firm striking roots in East. I'm from Odisha, and living there, constantly moving across the culture. So what does it means to us? So but we will discuss it from the point of view of writer. We are no academics, and definitely we have our own views. So when we are living not only in a post-colonial, but also, let's say, in a post-national world, and what we are having is an era of global literature, world literature, and this concept was given 2 centuries back by Goethe. And we will discuss on different aspects, but let's start discussing about our first experience with the people of respective opposite region. For example, I'd like to say, what was your first experience of meeting?
You mean the first experience or the first contact with India?
Both.
Both. Well, the first contact with India, I guess we'll all start to laugh now, was when I was such a small boy. And there was an advertisement, a line of fakayas, it seemed to me to be fakayas, were going through disappearing doors. And there was a melody, and when it ended up, it was said, "Drink Indian tea." This was my first encounter with it, but I was, I don't know, 4 years old or something like this. And some years later, there were 2 crazy films, 2 crazy German movies. And one was, it was entitled The Tiger of Eshnapur. And this was a very cruel Maharaja who was especially torturing the foreigners. And the foreigners coming from Europe were buried until the neck. Only the head stood out of the sand, and the elephants came, and this was the end of the Europeans. So something in between the fine taste of the tea and the strange thing of killing Europeans when I was a kid, I said to myself, knowing already some spices came from India or from outside, and we had the so-called colonial products, in German Kolonialwaren, it was written on the shops. I said to myself, I have to see such country where the people can have the chance to end up like this or drink tea. This was my first experience.
So the experience of stark contrast.
Yeah.
I have first went to Europe, actually to a conference organized by Helmuth and in Vienna. And there I had a literary interaction with the participants. especially they originally from UK or German-speaking countries. And when we had our conversation, they were wondering, oh, you know so much about us, but unfortunately we don't know much about you. You means in this sense about India, by extension about East. So my answer was, first of all, I was a bit offended by this comments, but then I always tell that since last 200 years at least, the West Europe is in limelight. You are in the center stage and we are the onlooker, and thereby having an advantageous position because you don't look at me, look at us, but we observe what you are doing. So definitely very soon we will find our way to the stage, and you will wonder once you come down from the stage, how do you find your position? We all know that we are living in a world where the power is not balancedly divided. It is not only in political or economic area, it is also in the cultural world. Maybe when I'll see that if there is an anthology of 200, let's say 200 best poems of our world of 20th century, I will wonder how many poets from India will find a place there. Maybe Tagore, maybe one or two from Asia, and all other poets will be from either from Europe or America. Maybe this is my impression.
You're completely right. We can say that in the German-speaking area, we have 10%, no, we have 100,000 publications in 1 year. 100,000 books are published in the German-speaking area. And the majority, and there's something about 25-30% are translations. So we can say, and we have the feeling very often, everything which is of importance is translated into German. Now we have to look a little bit more carefully what is really translated and where, and which is the area the books are coming from. So when you take 100% of the translations, it's something about 65% from the English-speaking world. Mostly UK and the United States of America and Canada. India is already very far behind. The French literature is much less, and I can't remember the figures completely, but the difference between English and French is already 7% of the publications on the translations. And the main is English, French, Italian, Spanish, and the rest is 1%. And this 1%, this is Arabic and Chinese and all the other languages. This means our outlook to the world is a very narrow one. And if something is published in an Indian language and does not come via English, it's not translated at all, because I see you here sitting, Amir, the first novel, what I know, written about the Jewish fate during the Second World War was published in 1941 in Marathi. This novel was never translated and never published in German. I still have it on my shelf. It is one of my tasks, but I will never do it, most probably. The writer is dead already, everybody has disappeared, but the first thing that someone writes about a Jewish man, no, about a Jewish woman leaving the Nazi system, going into exile, is 1941 by an Indian. It was never translated. You haven't known it.
From my perception, the Indian literature is almost invisible in Europe. I'm talking about continental Europe. I can't speak about UK because with them we have a very special relationship. But in continental Europe, you can't find Indian literature. 2006, India was the guest of honor in Frankfurt Book Fair. It was a huge campaign. It was a huge thing for Indians, and they have commissioned to publish a lot of books. But if we see, if you ask that which Indian author do you know, they will definitely say, first of all, Salman Rushdie, Amitabh Ghosh. So why it is that? Because we know that the book industry, it is a ruthless industry, business like any other. So for profit-making purpose, they look towards the English-speaking publishers. So they know that, okay, their money is yet secure, and now we will publish the English-speaking authors. Vishnu Kareji, he's sitting here, his book is translated into German, and there are a couple of publishers, there are very few, handful of them, and they often get commission from some organization in India, but they never market the book. If you see in continental Europe, Nirmal Verma, or mostly Uday Prakash, he has been well received. And I think even if they are translated and they are available, they're known to a very, very limited audience. Either the people who are studying Indology, or the people who really want to go to India and they are really seriously involved with literature. So why you think, and how can we go over it and solve this problem?
Well, I suppose the problem of getting to know the literature, not only the Indian literature, because the same applies for the Indonesian literatures and the Philippine literatures and many of the South American literatures. South America is completely out of fashion already. This must be a project run by the UN, because a printing company is not a social welfare institution. They want to make money. That's the matter of this. So easy. Well, and especially when the capitalist system only is looking for profit, and you don't have any strategy to, was heißt dagegen steuern?
You can work against it.
Yeah, to work against it, then you have to find means. Now we are coming from, we are both living in Austria. We are in a very special situation that in Austria, the books and the production of books is highly subsidized from the government. And the idea is, because we are German speaking, we have to keep our own national identity. And before the Austrian identity disappears into the German identity, we subsidize our own books. You have to see that about 90% of the books sold in Austria are coming from Germany. So it's a permanent fight. Now, as a representative of PEN, to add this here, we are like a closed workshop. We can do things like translating of Indian literature, or South American literature, African literature, and the companies are subsidized. Now, at least we are able to produce the books, but the media does not go with us. And on the other hand, there's the concentration of bookstores. And the book which does not sell is not in the shelves. And we know already in our area, a book, when it comes out, has to be successful within 6 weeks. If it is not sold within 6 weeks, just give it away, nobody will buy it anymore. Or the specialists, as you say. There are some people, they say, well, isn't there a poetry collection of Amitav Ghosh or Kushban Singh or whoever?
Actually, because we are now sitting in Odisha, unfortunately, there is nothing, no Odia translation is available in German-speaking country. Often none, I have seen translation of Ramakant Rath, and a couple of other translations, but not in a book form. So we were negotiating, so maybe it is possible that we will make anthology, a collection of Odia literature in German. But this is an initiative would be an initiative of PEN or organization like that. And as you rightly mentioned, it is the job of the UNO to subsidize and to promote these cross-cultural activities. There is, I have heard to a couple of discussions here that the selling and production of book is going down and down. I want to say that it is not like that. It is I don't know if you know or not. First time during the Christmas time, the second most thing which people gifted in Austria was books. So there is a bright future. And the thing is that we should know where the resource is and how to channelize this resource with the right sources.
It's true that last Xmas, the first was electronics, and then there were already books bought by people to give them as a gift as Xmas. But you have to see what kind of books the people buy and give it as a gift. This is not literature. These are cooking books and how to, I don't know, get to have a second husband and keep him alive or something like this. These are the books which are really sold, but not the ones with poetry and literature. But at least the people still go into bookstores and buy books, or they buy the so-called bestsellers, you know, which are promoted in the media. This is the next problem, that the media is not really following the difficult literary production. May I give you a small little example, because it happened to me several years ago. I made an anthology and I was phoned and they said, you will be on a very big show, this book will be in a very big show in Germany. And this show is 3 times, once live and then twice repeated. And overnight they sold 10,000 copies. But all the other books I had, they were not touched by this. It was only a heap like this. And when the books were sold, nobody demanded them afterwards, because after 3 weeks, I forgot that there was a TV show. It shows only how difficult it is to keep a book in a bookstore and to make a promotion. Well, last thing to this, the best way to sell books is the reading of the author. Authors, when they go around in a country, read here and there and there and there and there, they always sell books. But the way into the bookstore is another problem.
Again, coming back to the East and West relationship, or East and West literature, I would say, I beg your pardon, but I would say there is a certain narrow-mindedness in Europe regarding this, because they say that every literary movement has started in Europe, and so we are in a position. So we are the forerunner of every movement. So we don't need to know the world literature. This is my perception, and
I agree.
And on the other hand, we, the post-colonial countries, we are bitten by the colonial era. And for example, India is a very vast market. And you have a lot of readers. So if the Indians are sometimes very happy to be with themselves, and because they have a lot of readers here. So they don't bother if they are getting translated somewhere else or not, because they think, because we are old civilization, it is the duty of the people, they should know about it. And surprisingly, when you say that, okay, India has 22 official, I mean, I don't know now how many, so many languages, and they say that human dialects, so no, they are literatures. So why this has all happened? I mean, I think during the colonialization project, as Edward Said said, they not only exploit the resources, they also exported the colonial mentality to us. So we always, and there was an asymmetrical transfer of knowledge from that period, and it continues. And so always for canonizing our literature, or we always look towards the West. And I think this is a problematic area which has to be addressed.
Definitely has to be addressed. There were quite some years ago, the most important critics said now we establish a canon of the important literature worldwide. The non-European literatures, or the books coming from non-European literatures, were at the end of the line, and there were only some few, I guess 5 or 6 among 100 was the Mahabharata, it was the Ramayana, something like this. But contemporary literature, among the first 100, there were some South Americans, I guess there was Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and very few. Most of them were European or US Americans. That's the way it is.
I mean, as I already said, Goethe was the one who has floated the idea of world literature. And it has been always a literary interaction between both the cultures. So he was so much influenced by Hafiz that he has his East-West Divan. And W. Yeats was also so much influenced by Rabindranath Tagore. Needless to say, Hermann Hesse and T.S. Eliot. Likewise, in our countries, during all the progressive movement, all the literature, it has been very much influenced by the Russian great masters. And due to our colonial past, many of our writers, they get the inspiration from Western writers. So it is nothing new, but we have arrived in an era of a new paradigm with the abolishment of colonial time, and the colonial people, they're getting back to their own center. And there was then the subject of the colonialized country. There was an influx of the people from colonial countries to England and to all the countries they have colonialized them.
Maybe you should see it like this. The Europeans, when they left Europe and conquered or invaded or came to all these places of the world, around the globe, they did not ask for permission. Now, when the people come from other countries to Europe, I would say they have almost the moral right not to ask for permission, because the Europeans also went there and did not ask. So, you have to see there is something already out of balance. But, and the people coming to Europe, they bring their customs, they bring their habits, they bring the language, and they bring the literatures. And I'm absolutely sure that this will change on the long run Europe. There will, in some few years, and we see it already, people coming from other areas, living in Europe, they create a new kind of literature. Yes. This is not the old, the traditional forms of German literatures. It is not the typical form of a South America or Indian literature. It is something new. It's something in between. There's a playing of words, which is very fantastic, completely new. But I suppose the majority of the people, those who are not so observing so clearly the new tendencies, and the new tendencies also 20 years already, there will be a change, definitely.
I second you, and there is an idea of hybrid writers, and it is the idea was given by Homi K. Bhabha, colonial theorist. And he told that colonialism is something you can't keep it locked in the past. And there are immigrants, and their immigrants' children, the writers of second generation, like Jhumpa Lahiri, like Hanif Qureshi or Zadie Smith. These people are penetrating, as you say, creating a new culture, a new literature, which you cannot put it in some box. But I think the problem lies in exchanging of regional literature, which we are writing right now in present, and exchange of this literature. For example, We don't have any translation of Odia literature. People are less interested what is written in Assami, written in Gujarati, in German-speaking country or in Europe, because they cannot identify themselves with it. So how do you think that you can bring the readers in Europe to that, because you can't force anyone to buy the books? So what is needed to be done there?
Well, I'm not so optimistic about it. Unfortunately, I would say I'm not optimistic at all. One way to transfer knowledge or to bring literature, new forms of literature into the people's mind would be a school system which covers this topic. But when I see how many problems already not solved in the school, in our schools at least, I'm not very optimistic that they have time for it. Now the next possibility will be the mass media. When I see that the mass media is in private hands, and it is, as they said some years before, this a slalom from show to show, from creamy to creamy, from porno to porno, I don't see a gap how to put there in between literature, because it is entertainment, infotainment, and how to transport literature into the public TV channels that the people really want to see it. I'm not so optimistic. I don't see in the moment what we call in German a format, how to educate in a way that the people don't feel that they're educated, they are not educated, that they feel entertained and they learn something. I don't see it at the moment.
I mean, yes, what you are telling is true, but don't you think, we have now a lot of options, just like social media, like writing a blog and connecting each other through the social media platform. And this is what we can do informally. Because if you expect that it would be some government project, and it has then a starting point, it has an ending point. When they end the project, that's it. So I think the literary festivals like this, the interaction between the writer, the translations project, and the personal contact to each other, because there is always a limited number of people who are interested in culture and literature. So I think these are the alternative channel we should adopt to have a better understanding of each other, because sometimes I see as more we get globalized, we get scared of each other, and that shouldn't be there. And we hope that we all will keep these things in mind, and we will work accordingly to make the world a better place to live, to understand each other, because we are now ahead of we are in a post-national world. And what we think, we should think that the human value, the human relationship should matter more than any other national identity or cultural supremacy.
Yeah. This is, as we say in German, golden words. But these are golden words. That means they are spoken, but they don't have any meaning. When I look at the US American president, I have a problem, and he says, America first. Then I really have a problem with such a guy to say we are behind our national systems and behind our national states. No, I see quite the opposite. I really have a problem with this. I'm sorry, I'm not, I'm translating and I'm publishing all these things, but I do it, yeah.
Let's end with a positive note, because they say if you work or do a better job, then you can at least reduce one rogue from the world. Let's do that, sure. And let's see. Thank you.
Yeah, but let me ask you one thing. How many books are translated in 1 year from other languages? Must not be only European languages. From outside India into the Indian languages.
I'm afraid nowadays it is not much translation is going on, because we are indulging more with our literatures.
Because there's because you see that I'm sitting in all these, in the last hundreds of years, books from European languages translated into Arabic is not as much as is translated in 1 year into Spanish. And now we know what is dialogue. We are complaining, we are not open for the world, and our partners, they are not translating us into their languages. And when I was quite recently in North Africa, when I spoke with some people, they said, and I asked them what is translated, and they said Goethe, Schiller, Hesse, and that's it. I said, what the contemporary literature? I said, no. So they don't know what we are talking about, what is our discourse, because Goethe is our classical writer. And this is 200 years ago. And they think it's contemporary. So we are not talking on the same level. And when I say what is translated in my language, they said, well, this is not really literature. This is entertainment. And then they speak about authors. I never heard about them. So this is a very
You have to see it positively. Now you see, we have translated Austrian literature. We have translated Rosa Ausländer in Hindi. So we are having...
Yeah. We opened the door a little and we go in, okay?
Sure,
Okay.
yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, too.
I think it was Meenakshi Mukherjee, Professor Meenakshi Mukherjee, the late Professor Meenakshi Mukherjee, who pointed out that, you see, the Indian writers in English who are writing fiction, very few of them, like Amitav Ghosh and all, are getting a market outside. The rest are known only in India. But they're happy with that. It's not necessary that they should strive to get the market outside. But they're happy with getting published in India and writing fiction, because poetry as it is, they have been saying, does not sell and so on. Though more poets are writing again and again now today in English. We have to note that. This brings us to the question of translation. Translation of Indian literature, the question is whether it is being done enough in the languages or not, in the regional languages. The answer seems to be a no. The other option is English. So why can't we find a market for that?
So I would say that, as I already told you, that India is itself a vast market. The Indian writer, they really doesn't bother if they are getting outside or not. Amitav Ghosh and other writer which you mentioned, they know for whom they are writing. So somehow they make the readers in West that they can identify with their writings, and a sort of exotic touch. They leave some exotic, mystic touch so that they can say that, okay, we are reading some Indian literature, every other things, we cannot read everything. So that's the reason.
Normally, when something is coming from another area, it should not be too foreign, too strange. This is a very important thing, but not too familiar. There's a small little area, space, where this thing is taking place. If something like Kushman Singh's Delhi, Novel Delhi was translated into German. It was not very successful because it was too strange. And Singh said several times when he was in Vienna, there's coming a bloodshed, there's coming a bloodshed. And when you read the novel, you have the glimpse there might be a bloodshed. So this is not a very successful thing. Amitav Ghosh, for example, when he writes a huge novel about I remember well the Burmese king who came down to who was then in India in exile. This is a page turner. But it could happen in South America, it could happen anywhere. This doesn't say it's not against the literary quality. It is the topic and how to solve. Sorry.
Siddhartha Deb, a novelist from Shillong, in fact he was my student in Shillong, He wrote a novel based in Shillong in the 1970s and 80s called Point of Return. And that was absolutely local. All the areas in Shillong, Laimukra, Police Bazaar, everything which I'm familiar with were mentioned, and it got universal acknowledgement.
I have a Vishnu Bhai is also there, I am there. We share same organization, we worked for National Book Trust, and we presented India as guest of honor in Frankfurt twice, not once. And my question, I don't have any idea about market in Austria, but I have some idea about market of Germany. My personal observation is, of course, I'll make my question as well. Their market is not like our market. Frankfurt is not a consumer's market. It is more for rights. And that is why, that is more for institutional market and rights. So, and their publishers, they don't, of course, the publishing entire thing was dealt by Sahitya Academy and National Book Trust from here, and from their country, some institutes were there. But publishers, they are only choosy about the rights, not about selling our books. And they want direct translators from Indian, any Indian language, suppose Odia into German. They don't want via English. So my question would be, how open is Austria in that your publishers would be interested to translate to German what is used in Austria from Odia via English as a link language?
Definitely, as a translator, I would also not go for, especially, let's talk about poetry. If you translate it, the Odiyas in English and then to German, and poetry is such a compact medium, a lot of things you missed. If you
don't talk of poetry alone.
Yes,
talk about fiction.
Yes, I
even non-fiction.
I would talk about fiction. Because translating is twice. Translation itself, you can never do 100%. 100%. You can't translate a thing 100%. And if you are translating via another language, then a certain essence always go missing. So if that, nowadays in India, in the universities, a lot of foreign language has been they are teaching right now a lot of foreign languages. So why not Indian government should, or the institution should encourage the student to begin a career as a translator? Because of course, I will I share the opinion of the publisher there. There's one piece of literature should get translated as far as it is possible from the original language.
It is already there. You don't have the information. Many universities in India, they have already opened the course, including JNU. They have a translation chair also of the rank of professor. Mr. Ranjit Saha was there, Siva Prakash was there. They were dealing with this only. So it is already there. But what happens we are very liberal in case of translating and popularizing works from the West. Many poets, we don't know German. But there have been several translations of Octavio Paz and many people. But through English, via English. Some people may be knowing German, translated it into Hindi. And from Hindi also it can come to Odia in Indian languages also it happens. But I personally, why I questioned, I don't have any idea about Austrian market. But I know very well about German market. That they are not interested in popularizing our books, they are only interested in the rights in Germany. Of course, Vishnu Bhai can, yes. He was actively involved with the project, India Guest of Honor.
See, we are not addressing two basic problems here. Number one is that gradually Indian languages are dying in Europe. One by one language is followed by another. You cannot find a single Oriya department, Assamia department, even Bengali is fading out. For this, it's very essential that the government of India should subsidize the teaching of Indian languages.
You're
Number one.
absolutely right.
I'm not finished. Not finished. The second question is that the government of India must subsidize the publication and translation of Indian literature into European languages. Every civilized country has a translation bureau, and they are giving subsidy to people like me to translate Dutch literature into Hindi. There's not a single institution which supports translations from Indian authors into European languages. In Frankfurt, we tried an experiment. We subsidized 50 books, and they were published. But after that, somebody stupid abandoned the scheme in the HRD ministry. So, what we have to do is to, and another thing, the European publishers do not like native Indian translators to translate into German. They hate the idea that an Indian should translate into German. They discourage it totally. They say, no, a translation in German will have to be done by a native German. And I think it's a very healthy thing, because I've read some atrocious translations done by the so-called professors of German, or they're stupid, unreadable. A translation has to be done by a native speaker of that language. Nobody else should touch it.
Vishnuji, you're right. I mean, there is a University of Hamburg, it is University of Munich, University of Vienna, they are teaching Hindi. University of Cologne is teaching Tamil. University of Heidelberg, this is more liberal, they are teaching Hindi, Urdu and some Bengali. And there is absolutely no other language being represented in German-speaking country. And what Vishnuji tells that there is, the thing is that he is absolutely right, but it should be done as a project. Because India was the guest of honor in Frankfurt Book Fair, not once, but twice, one in 1986, and again in 2006. I was personally present in 2006. A book of mine was published by a publisher in Austria, because they wanted to show that they have an Indian writer coming from Austria. What I have seen there, that the whole book fair, it was dealt as a project. Manas Babu Apanbhai. And the project has ended and there is no follow-up. And that should be a continuous flow. It shouldn't be taken as a one-time project. That should be a bureau, and that should be a collaboration in translation. Maybe if I will do now a translation of Odia poem anthology in German, I will definitely do that with Helmuth. Because even if I know German, the nuances of the language, that should be worked out much better with a native speaker. And that should be done, and that it should be an ongoing process. It shouldn't stop in one project.
In Frankfurt has a problem. Every year it's another topic. And the topic doesn't have a follow-up. It's Africa. Africa is not a nation, but it's Africa. And the next year, they know it is China or India, whatever. This is the main problem, because there's no follow-ups. In 1 year, they are published, I don't know, 100 books, 50, 200, I don't know, I never got the figure. This is not very important. But suddenly, a lot of publishing companies edit books from this country or from this continent, but in the next year, this continent doesn't exist anymore. And the country is over. So if it is Israel one day, we will have, I don't know, 300 books from Israel, and the next year, nothing at all. This is the problem of Frankfurt. But this is what they say, this is the market. It is not a social welfare institution. We have to see what is what. This is the market.
So thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.